Okay.
Welcome to the Nerd Social. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Colin.
So we're going to talk about Loki today and also The Bad Batch. Episode 8 through 10, I think we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about episode 4 of Loki. Sorry.
Yep.
So as always, we will go through the spoiler-free talk about the episode, and then we will jump into our spoiler discussion about the episode. So, Colin, do you want to start off? What you thought about episode 4 of Loki?
So definitely a lot has happened, and probably just judging from my friends' reaction online and things like that. And also after I watched it at 3 a.m. right at the start, I definitely felt that it was, it's been kind of building up ever since the first episode. And so this was where the rubber really hits the road in terms of major things happening. And it probably is the most strongest episode by far of Loki. And just, the things that they were teasing in the first, especially in episode 3, the Lamentus episode from last week, it really kind of came out and in full force regarding it. And so it was definitely very compelling, and there was definitely some really interesting twists, as well as some surprises that were available to the whole during this episode. So definitely keep watching it. Definitely, stay tuned in, because I think that there's going to be even more than what they offered here in episode 4.
Yeah. So, as you said, a lot happens. It's a really good episode. I don't have much to complain about in this episode because, as you said, it's probably the best episode that they've done so far. Yeah, there's so many reveals that it's really difficult to actually talk about the episode without spoiling the episode. What I can say is that the acting in this was really great. The only thing that and the writing in this was really great as well. It definitely is the best episode that they've had so far. People online have been saying that it's probably the best episode that they've had in the MCU of all the shows. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I really have to go back and think about the episodes to really make that assessment. But it was really great, and if you're not sold on the show after seeing this episode, I'm not sure. Maybe you should just tap out. I don't know, because I don't know how you stop here. I don't know how you stop here, and you're not really interested in what's going to happen next. The only thing that I would say is a little bit of let down for this episode, but not just this episode, for the entire series so far, is the fight choreography is a little weak. And it's like a nitpick, but the director is doing really good work with the talky stuff. But she actually, I don't know who the director is off the top of my head, but the director,
Kate Herron, I think was okay. Kate Herron.
Yeah, so unlike the director for Falcon and Winter Soldier, who is also a woman, she doesn't direct action as well as the previous director did, and I think her background, the Falcon and Winter Soldier director's background, she had done episodes of Viking and a lot of other action stuff, but all the fight choreography seems a little sloppy and weird. I mean, putting aside that these are supposed to be gods, and in the previous episode, they were fighting ordinary people outside of the TVA, and they should have been able to throw people around like rag dolls, and they weren't able to do that. I'm going to put that aside for a second, but in this, it just it just seemed a little sloppy and looked like they were doing stage fighting. So it was obvious that things weren't connecting and things like that, which was it's a little annoying. But the episode in general was so strong that it's, like I said, a nitpick. So I definitely would recommend not just the episode but the show, because after this I'm sure you want to know what happens next. But it's really hard to say why without getting into spoilers, so I think we should jump over to a quick conversation about spoilers before we get into the Bad Batch stuff. So this is the last warning. If you haven't seen the episode, go see the episode. It's worth your time. Spoiler alert, and we will jump into our spoiler talk now. So what do you want to start with, Colin?
Just that there is love, and it's very beautiful. Even though there's a lot of controversy about it online about the whole situation, I like it. I mean, last week, I did mention that there was a lot of romantic tension between Sylvie and Loki. You could definitely see it there. They just kind of took that to another level, and the title of the episode is Nexus Event. So the Nexus Event is basically them like being together at the very end of the apocalypse on Lamentus. And so just a couple of things that kind of stood out was that iconic picture of people during the trailer. They thought that it was Black Widow in front of the Avengers Tower. So basically they did a deep fake. They basically took out the Avengers Tower and just like put Sylvie's silhouette there, and so I predicted that was going to be happening at the beginning of the next episode. It was the case, but without the Avengers Tower there. And it was a very touching scene. I think that they kind of knew that. We were speculating last week as to what will happen, like who's going to really what's going to really happen, and I think that. They did it did it beautifully to say where are they going to be, what's going to happen, and then you kind of knew that maybe the TVA was going to save them. But at the same time, I remember last week we were just like, what's going to happen? Like, are they going to be stuck there? Are they going to die? And they're going to go do some like random type of thing. But they kept it simple. They basically said the TVA came and rescued them. But before them, it was just a very kind of touching moment. They were touching hands, and it was just very beautiful overall. I just felt that, they really kind of deserve each other in a lot of ways. And even though Mobius kind of made fun of that, like, you're such a, crazy narcissist for like loving yourself. And yes, it is partly like that, but I think that there is definitely a genuine, that kind of love-hate type of thing that developed, just like what I said last week with it's like the interaction between Han Solo and Princess Leia was very similar to this, like in some ways, but yeah, you could definitely feel that there was that tension. And then toward the end of the episode, you saw like she was kind of like, I don't really know what you're trying to say, and like Loki's trying to get it out, like really trying to get it out, and I was like on pins and needles trying to like tell her already, So who hasn't ever experienced that in their lives? So I think that the whole thing was actually very touching and really nice overall.
Yeah. I'm sort of know where Mobius is coming from. He technically is it's not much different than the rest of his life. He's technically in love with himself. We already knew he was in love with himself before the series started. So it is a little weird. It's just a different version of himself from a different universe that doesn't exist anymore. But it's still himself that he's fallen in love with. The only person he's at the end of the episode, he said, "This has never happened to me before." So he's never loved anyone before except for himself. So yes, if you look past that, I guess it's touching because I can't tell whether or not it was reciprocated. I'm not sure because as you said, the episode is called the Nexus Event, and I'm not sure if the Nexus Event was created just because he was feeling something for himself, basically, or he was feeling something for a version of himself, which is just a thing that shouldn't happen. Or if they were feeling something like it was reciprocated, because like I said, she looked a little confused at the end of the episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Like she didn't know what he was talking about or what he was trying to get at. But yeah, that I mean, that was an interesting part of the episode that will. I want to see where that goes because he's definitely feeling something, and even Mobius playing with him a little bit, saying that they erased her. He got an obvious reaction from him, which is right. Interesting. You don't really get many react. He doesn't really. He's not really a hard on sleeve sort of guy. He's always close to the vest. You don't know what he's thinking because he's always playing and manipulating sort of guy. So those exchanges were really interesting.
Yes.
I don't know. There's so many revelations in this episode. Mobius gets disintegrated, or he gets what did they say? What's the terminology they use? Pruned. He got pruned. Yeah. He gets pruned. Then Loki gets pruned at the end of the episode, and then we find out at the end of the episode, if you look at the end credit scenes, because there's a mid credit scene rather. That Loki's somewhere else, so he's not actually pruned. So maybe Mobius is still alive. Maybe everyone who gets pruned is sent there. I don't know. Or maybe just Lokis are sent there because he was just greeted by a bunch of Lokis, which is I guess we can get back to in a second. But they're we find out that Renslayer is a liar. And a bad liar. Like at the beginning of the episode, it's very obvious that she's lying about certain things, like Hunter B. I think it was Hunter 20 or Hunter B20 or something like that.
Hunter C20.
C20. Yeah, because the other one is B15, right?
B15. Yeah.
Right. So Hunter C20, he wanted to speak to Hunter C20, and she told him. Mobius that Hunter C20 is dead, which is weird because Mobius is like, well, she seemed fine. She just seemed disoriented, but she seemed fine. So, and she's not a very convincing liar, which is why later on when Loki is pushing him rather, saying that all the liars here, you're the biggest liar because you're always lying to yourself. You're trying to avoid scratching at the surface. There's so many, and then we go to Hunter B15. Apparently, she's been feeling weird ever since the Rocks Cart store, right? Because that's when when she was swapped out. Apparently, she saw something, and she's been feeling something, or feeling that she saw something, and she takes her back to Rocks Cart to see the memory, and we don't get to see what the memory is, but she seems very happy in that memory. And she seems so happy in that memory that she is willing to go against this organization that she thought she was fighting for her entire life. Like she's like the most hardcore person there. Like she would have pruned Loki as soon as she saw him. She was never really interested in using him as a whatchamacallit, because she thinks that all variants are basically just mistakes. She said cosmic. She calls them cosmic mistakes. So to see her turn so it's like in a 180 on this because of those memories. It was very interesting. So they have she had two people against her, Renslayer. Her whole thing is falling apart. So there are other things that I mean, like I said, there's a lot that happens in this episode. There are a lot of reveals. There are reveals about the timekeepers as well.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I think that it's definitely very interesting where, at the very beginning it was her that kidnapped basically Sylvie as a child, and so you saw that at the very beginning. She was on Asgard, and they didn't really give a reason as to why they kidnapped her. And then she basically spent her entire life kind of running away from the TVA because probably most likely she was going to get pruned like as a child. And so because she was cunning enough to kind of take that the temp pad away from Renslayer, that she was able to jump around all throughout her life. And that's that's a very, like what Loki said, it was a very admirable thing for her to do, where she was basically just jumping around from apocalyptic event to apocalyptic event, just trying to survive. And so you do kind of sympathize with her and her motivations, because from the beginning you thought, oh, she's just evil just because. And but then you go through her backstory, you kind of dig a little deeper throughout each of the episode. You understand that she was traumatized basically as a child. Like, who wouldn't be traumatized? You're taken away from your own home that all your life. I mean, basically twice traumatized if you count that she was taken from the Frost Giants as well. So I mean, all those type of feelings definitely. And then she lost her mother as well. She didn't even know her mother. So there's a lot that's there that you can definitely, again, sympathize with her character. And then I think you mentioned, Nathan, about the big reveal about the timekeepers, and that kind of opens up a huge type of thing. People are speculating about Kane coming into play. We also have speculated about Renslayer's relationship. Yeah. So like the timekeepers, being definitely a big reveal, being like some type of robotics, artificial organism, things like that, and then Mobius getting pruned, and Loki getting pruned as well. And then it was like twist upon twist, where it was definitely a very fascinating kind of ride almost throughout the episode, and what made it very compelling.
Yeah. It was. I mean, just from the beginning, like you said, there were lots of reveals. Renslayer has been. I mean, the Hunter Hunter C-20 thing was not the first lie that we realized in this episode. We've realized that the person that she's been sending people to run after for I don't know how long they've been trying to run after this Loki, Sylvie rather. It was her mistake. It was her mistake years and years ago, and she didn't tell anyone it was her mistake. She's acting like, oh, this is some rogue Loki. She of course knew who this was. She knew, and she's been trying to fix her mistake probably for years or however long. Because here's the thing, like Loki is probably thousands of years old. So how long has she been trying to fix her mistakes? Now she grabbed her when she was a child, and she's been living in apocalypses and learning magic, because she didn't learn it from her mother, because she was taken too soon. Learning magic, learning these things. She's been living probably just as long as the Loki that we know, or the Loki that the Loki that we know. So yeah, and it's interesting. How long has she been dissembling? How much does she know about how the timekeepers actually function? Because she goes in there. She goes in there after the cut scene, or the flashback rather, of her losing Sylvie. We cut to her going in to see the timekeepers, and then we don't see anything. So anything could have happened in that room. It could have been. I mean, all the pomp and circumstance could have been just for the hunters that are guarding the timekeepers. And then when she went in there, we see the real person behind the mask, which is maybe Kang or someone else, or maybe it's just her. I don't know, because at the end, she's fighting Sylvie, and she tells her to prune her, right? Maybe she's saying prune her because she knows she's not going to actually die. I don't know. But I mean, at the beginning just like at the end of the last episode, it was going to be obvious that the next thing that we saw was how they're going to escape, and I agree with you from what you said earlier. This was a novel. There's a good way to solve that problem. It's better than some of the theories that were floating around on the internet. Him having the time stone and things like that. This makes more sense within the little world that they're trying to create within this show. That their love for each other, or at least Loki's love for her, created the Nexus Event so that they can actually be found. But yeah, so that's how we started this episode. How we're going to start the next episode is I don't know how what incentive Renslayer has to kind of spill her guts if she doesn't think that she's going to die if she gets pruned. because she asked to get pruned. How is she going to get the information out of her? I mean, I guess she could continue like beat her like Loki kept getting beat by Lady Sif in this episode. So many things happened in this episode. We've been talking for like 20 minutes already, and we didn't even mention that Lady Sif kept beating on Loki over and over again in a loop.
Yeah, that was definitely very, very funny and very appealing. And so I think it's like to the point where he was kind of like saying, ha ha, it's like, was it a joke, it was funny. And then it kind of like, as it kept progressing, he was like, no, just please stop. And it's like, please stop. And then to the point where at the very end, I think the last time, he was like, yes, I'm pathetic and I'm a narcissist and things like that. He just like completely just gave up. I'm done with this. And then when he came back and then he was talking with Mobius, and then he was trying to play games with him. He was like, no, don't send me back there, because it was just like, how many times do you want to have to keep going through that, getting slapped in the face and then, kicked in the groin, it's like, you don't want to keep doing that for the rest of your life,
I don't think, she's a warrior. She didn't slap him in the face. She punched him in the face.
Okay.
She kept punching him in the face and kicking him and kneeing him in the groin over and over and over again. So it's interesting that I don't know how the speculation is that we only saw it 2 or 3 times, but speculation is that maybe it happened like 20 or 30, because it was like once every 30 seconds or so, less than a minute every time it was happening, and they cut away for long periods of time. So maybe this was like, I don't know, 100 or something that he broke down, and he was like, you know what, I'm a narcissist. I just want attention because I think I'm going to be alone. And you think that she's going to respond differently, and she doesn't punch him or groin knee him this time, but she does say, you are going to be alone, because at the end of every single loop after she assaults him, she says you're gonna always be alone. It's right. And it doesn't. I don't think she's actually, from my perspective, and I'm not sure if you have a different perspective on this, I don't think that they're actually dropping him in that space in real time with the actual Sif. I think maybe it's a program, like it's like a time program, and she's reacting the way that Sif would react. But I don't know. Maybe she's not reacting the way Sif would react. Maybe Sif would have reacted more compassionately to him breaking down like that. But I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Nathan. I don't. Yeah, it could be a time program, or it could be, I don't know. I mean, now that you mentioned it's a time program, it may be just that, and it might not be just during that period of time in which he remembered, because, the secret timeline is very. I mean, I don't know if it's even like within a different type of timeline that they're doing that. So you don't even know. And then, if it was that case, they have to clean the timeline again and again. So you may be onto something where it could be like a time program where it was some type of traumatic event that happened, during his life, and then just kind of looping it again and again and again, just for him to like kind of like break basically and like say, okay, I give up and I'm going to spill the beans, that type of thing. So it's interesting in that regard.
If you notice the door that's created before they shove him in, it's not yellow like all the other time thing. It's red. So maybe it's just like a program that they're throwing him into, a simulation, because they basically have all the information from all the universe at the TVA, right? Like that when he showed up, he had to sign off on everything he's ever said ever, right? So they know they could with that much information, they could recreate Sif in software without actually destroying or messing with the timeline, right? So I think it was probably a program.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. I mean, I think I never thought of it like that, and I think that's actually a very interesting kind of point where it could be again, they're just kind of like thinking about traumatic events that one person have, and then just kind of having that relive them again and again and again and try to repent in some ways, and that would be very traumatic for anyone to go through that. Of course, they're gonna have to like at least flip or something like that. So. yeah, that was definitely a surprise, and overall, I think it was again it kind of showed a lot of who Loki is as an individual, kind of like a more not pathetic, but more like the anti-hero, and the more kind of more depth than it was say when he was in Ragnarok or in Infinity War. A lot more depth to the character than they did, and that's actually one of the beauties of these shows is how you really get to dive deep into the characters. Just as an example, with in the previous one, Sam Wilson, we were able to talk endlessly about kind of like the dynamics as he had, and also with Vision and Wanda, the grief and all that. So they were able to really explore all those themes, and I think that they've been doing a good job about Loki. I think the theme that's kind of like bubbling up is the whole like, can you love yourself in some ways? What does that mean? Probably, what's that essential question mean? Probably.
I think they're trying to wrestle with a few questions here. It's about loving yourself, but it's also about accepting. Do you have to accept who the world says that you are? Because at the end, when Mobius finds out that Renslayer is lying to him, he goes to Loki and says, I thought you could be anything you wanted to be, even good, just in case no one's told you that. So are you destined to be who everyone says you are, or can you break out of that loop? Is also something that they're trying to talk about and trying to wrestle with in this show. And they mentioned that this actually at the beginning of the episode as well, because when Sylvie and Loki are on Lamentis, she says, or Loki's always destined to lose. Again, so it's about can you break out of your loop? Can you break out of who you're destined to be, or you're destined, or you're who the world says that you're supposed to be, is I think what they're trying to wrestle with in those conversations, in the show in general, which is interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that definitely those themes are just it is interesting in that they're able to kind of pick out these like human character themes, all throughout the 3 Disney Plus series so far, and it's just like exploring almost the human psyche in a lot of different nuanced ways, which you don't necessarily see in. I haven't seen that in the MCU, but I think that I'll be very intrigued if they keep this theme going with the other kind of Disney Plus shows that are coming out this year and next year. What are the type of themes that are going to be that they're going to kind of latch onto? That's going to be different from, say, the 3 Disney Plus series that have come out so far. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of where they go with it. And I think that one final thing that I want to mention is that the song just great songs overall in the end credits. Just very kind of on the for those people that think like, oh, it's too on the nose and stuff like that. They might not like that type of idea, but I kind of like the fact that the songs kind of represented kind of like their situation, like Sylvie and Loki's situation during that time. If you read into the lyrics are pretty easy to follow for both songs, and I think that it really does kind of tie into and try to bring home the idea about their relationship, which was really strong.
Yeah. So what did you make of what happened to the timekeeper when they're when Sylvie threw the sword? So what do you think is going on there?
Yeah, that's I don't really know what to make of that. I mean, they did mention online about how this is very Wizard of Oz, and it did kind of feel like Wizard of Oz, but you don't really know who's behind the curtain yet. You don't know. So I mean, I don't know whether or not they're going to address that in the next 2 episodes to kind of wrap it up. But considering the fact that they're going to have a season 2, there might be some cliffhanger. I don't know. I mean, there might be some cliffhanger, and you speculated, I think, a couple of weeks back, is that it seems as though Thor and Loki are in kind of like these parallel trajectories. They're not going to cross over, most likely, in the next movie. So we're going to have some sort of fulfilling kind of ending. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem as though it might be the case. They may leave you hanging after the first season and say, what is going to happen in season 2? Because they've already kind of pushed forward with that. I think it's the only show so far where they're saying that they're going to be in season 2. So whether or not this TVA plot line is still going to continue, or in season 2 is just going to be a completely different type of thing that's going to happen.
I mean, the show is not called TVA; it's called Loki. So it could be a completely different situation for Loki in season 2. He could be dealing with something completely different. So I think what they will likely do. So the writer of this show is also the writer of Multiverse of Madness. So this will probably flow directly into Multiverse of Madness, and then that will flow directly into Quantumania, and then by that time maybe we'll have season 2 of this show, and then we'll get the aftermath of Multiverse of Madness and Quantumania, and then those 2 movies will tie into the show in season 2 of this show. Whatever reveals happen in those 2 movies, and also at the end of this show, they'll all flow into each other. That's my speculation right now, just because of who's writing. I don't know who's writing Quantumania, but who's writing this show and who's writing Multiverse. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and I think that I just wonder if they're going to even delay it even more, because whether or not Quantumania is gonna flow into Fantastic Four, because of Kang the Conqueror, being a Fantastic Four villain. It may be a while since for season 2 of Loki to come back out, but it'll be very interesting to kind of see how they're going to loop it back in, because if they based on what you just said, they're probably not going to have a show until 3 years from now, 2024. If they're going to keep doing that type of thing. So it'll be interesting how they're going to really put together like the story, or whether or not they're going to attach it to the movies and kind of like bleed into the movies or not. So it'll be kind of fascinating to kind of watch that come about.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know, when is Quantumania coming out?
February 2023, I think. Yeah, 2023.
Is that far away?
And then Fantastic Four was going to be around the summer of 2023.
Okay, yeah. They haven't even cast Fantastic Four, or I don't even know if they have a script yet. So who knows whether or not that's actually going to happen. I know Kang is a Fantastic Four villain, but that's where he started. But they're not necessarily wedded to doing where they started. I mean, or using Kang in that way, because even though that's where he started, since then he's become a Avengers villain several times. There are various versions of Kang. A younger version of Kang is like Iron Lad. He's actually like a kind of like a Tony Stark, because he was upset about the future version of himself, so he went back to try to. So there's so many different versions of Kang now from where he started as a Fantastic Four villain. They don't necessarily have to wait for Fantastic Four or necessarily connect him to the Fantastic Four, because there are other Fantastic Four villains. I mean, the big one is Victor Von Doom. As long as they do Doom with the Fantastic Four, they don't have to necessarily connect all the other villains that are connected to the Fantastic Four. Or maybe they decide not to do Doom, because the movies they didn't do well. The Fox movies did Doom. Sorry, yes, they did. I forgot for a second there that they did a reboot. So even in the reboot, they used Doom as well.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll choose someone else as their villain. Just like they rebooted Spider-Man several times, so that when Peter Parker got his first solo movie inside of the MCU proper, they used Vulture because they had kind of cycled through pretty much every other bad guy, and that's why they had to use Mysterio in the last movie. Who knows what the next person is, because they've actually, you know what, the next movie,
we know it's Dr. Octopus.
It's a bunch of people actually, because it's another multiverse movie.
Right.
So we'll see some repercussions from the Multiverse of Madness, or maybe I think the Spider-Man movie comes out before Multiverse of Madness. So maybe the multiverse starts to go mad in the Spider-Man movie, and then we see Multiverse.
Correct.
Yeah.
One other thing to mention in terms of tie into the MCU, there was a line that was dropped by Mobius about vampires, so very interesting that they're going to try to tie in Blade to that.
Yeah.
And how you kind of speculate, you kind of knew in the back of your mind that it was going to be some sort of multiverse type of thing that's going to happen to kind of introduce Blade. So who knows with the Fox acquisition whether or not they're just going to kind of take elements from the X-Men as well, and Blade as well to kind of fill in, and maybe even Deadpool as well. So it's gonna the multiverse does kind of lend itself to all that type of speculation and all that type of convenience to kind of bring them all in, bring all these action heroes and action figures into the MCU in some way.
Yeah, it was a nice throwaway line. They're just, I mean, it's kind of like he's coming eventually. We'll see him probably in a couple of years. It was a nice throwaway line, and for everyone. I mean, they threw it there. It doesn't have to mean anything to anyone except for people who are watching what's happening with the MCU in press releases as opposed to like movies and television shows. They know that Blade is coming at some point. So that was interesting. I'm trying to think if we missed anything else that in the episode before we move on to the Bad Batch, because like I said, a lot happened in this episode. Did you see? Was it clear what happened to Hunter B-15? Like she brought the sword and she was knocked out. Was she pruned?
Yeah, I think Renslayer was kind of like smoky and stuff like that, so you don't know whether or not she stayed alive, she was unconscious, or she died by the sword of Renslayer. And you don't even know, because Hunter C-20 died off screen. You don't even know if she is really dead. So you don't know. So it's still kind of a little bit unknown as to what the whereabouts of those two are going to be in the future.
I think B-15 is probably a bigger character in the show, so we may see her again. I mean, if we see, we're definitely seeing Loki again because we saw him in the after credits scene.
Right.
I don't know if we're going to see Mobius again. Hopefully, we'll see Hunter B-15 as well, so we get some more, like a full circle. I mean, we got that she was that she realized that she was kind of being lied to. We'll see whether or not Loki gets like an apology from her or something along those lines, or apology from, I mean, I guess her defecting was sort of an apology, at least to Sylvie, because she was hunting Sylvie for a lot longer than she was hunting Loki. So
right. Could be. I would speculate for the beginning of episode 5. I think it's going to be some sort of flashback to someone. Maybe Mobius. Maybe so you can get him in. Maybe Hunter B-15. A flashback. That type of sort of thing. Because I think they did that for Hunter C-20 in, I think episode 3.
Yeah, last week they had. It wasn't really a flashback though. They were. I mean, it's flashback, not necessarily to Hunter C-20's background. It was a flashback to Sylvie probing her mind, and in probing her mind, she used the previous memory. So it was like a flashback for like 20 minutes before they went through the portal. When the team showed up to Rock's cart. What she was doing before they showed up to Rock's cart. So we got a little bit of a glimpse of what her life looked like, but it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't much. It wasn't as big of a flashback as the one at the beginning of this episode, where we got the beginning of Sylvie's life, or early in Sylvie's life. I wonder if we're gonna ever understand why she was pruned at that point, because the fact that she was born a girl wasn't enough of a Nexus event for them to come and prune her, apparently.
Right.
So they I don't know what she did. Like, maybe she decided not to be a Loki. She decided to be a Valkyrie because she was playing with a bunch of toys, and one of the toys she was playing with was a Valkyrie. Maybe she decided to become a Valkyrie.
Yeah. I also did notice that there was a wolf there, so they were kind of probably replaying. So that I speculate whether or not Hela was involved at that time. Like, who was Hela at that time? You know, where was she? That because they did have a toy wolf there, so it's interesting. It just kind of brought up some interesting questions.
Yeah. I think that wolf was named Fenris or something like that in Ragnarok.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting. They have at the end at the end of this, we have all kinds of other variants of Loki. We have a black Loki, which the credits call him Boastful Loki, and then we have old Loki, and then we have Kid Loki, and then we have an alligator Loki. So I don't know, and how do we have an alligator Loki? In what universe was Loki born an alligator, or is that, or maybe? So there was some speculation online that, you know, that story that Thor tells in Ragnarok, that when he turned into a snake, maybe Loki turned into an alligator and he can never turn back, or something like that.
Could be. Yeah, that could be. I am assuming that it's something like that, where he was a humanoid form, and then they kind of have a spell, and so he turned into an alligator. Hasn't had any opportunity to kind of turn back to a humanoid form, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know how you explain old Loki or Kid Loki. So I mean, that they maybe the battles happened a lot earlier in history, so he's a lot older, and or maybe in this version he wasn't a frost giant. Maybe they had children a lot earlier, because if Loki is thousands of years old and Thor is thousands of years old, like Freya and Odin are like tens of thousands of years old, or so maybe they had this Loki a lot earlier. They decided to have children a lot earlier, and that's why you have an old
Could
Loki.
be. Yeah, I mean, he definitely, I think that played by Richard E. Grant, you know, he definitely was, I think, he's been in the comic. I mean, all these characters have been in comic books. So, you know, I haven't read the comic books yet, so I'm sure that there's probably some clues given about each of these characters from the comics, and I'm sure that they're kind of taking their time to try to explain what they're going to be, some type of iteration of what they were in the comics.
I mean, I don't know how much time. I mean, they have 2 episodes left. They don't have a lot of time to explain four new Lokis. But maybe they'll just have they'll have a quick line here or there to explain each one of them. That the Boastful Loki had a hammer similar to Thor's hammer. I haven't been able to read any speculation about what's going on there, but it was interesting to see that it doesn't look like Mjolnir, but it looks it I mean the handle's a little bit different, so it's not that. But maybe he becomes king because he's so boastful, and he's not it's like, I don't know, slimy as the regular Loki. Who knows what the issue there is, or what's going on there, and maybe that's why he's annoyed. Like, he becomes king, like he wanted, Loki always wanted to be, and then the TVA shows up and says, "No, you don't get to be king because Loki's not supposed to be king." No. But I'm really interested. That's I'm almost more interested in that than what's going on with the TVA. Because I suspect that the TVA thing is just going to be either Renslayer is the one pulling the strings, or it's going to be King. You can hear people in the background of my house during fireworks.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
They have fireworks there. Wow, that's amazing.
yeah. So yeah. All right. So let's move on to Bad Batch. So we could start talking about the last 3 episodes of Bad Batch. So actually, I had this up on my computer. The last episode, or the one that for today, is called not Common Ground. Yeah, today is Common Ground. Last week,
Common Ground. Yep.
Last week was Bounty Lost, and then the episode 8 was Reunion. So let's start with episode 8. And this is going to be full spoiler talk. I mean, because we can't go into what we thought about each episode. That would just take too long. So what do you think of Reunion? That we get Crosshair coming back.
Yep. In
Reunion.
So, yeah, definitely. The one thing was them, they always seem very resourceful bunch. The one with the when they're kind of crawling out of the engine, and then they fired up the engine and they were able to get out of that. I found that to be very interesting and compelling, where they always try to get out of very sticky situations and very impossible situations. And I think that it was definitely kind of edge of your seat in some ways. Like you kind of knew that they were going to get out, but you didn't know how they were going to get out. And so with them kind of coming up with an idea of getting out by exploding a piece of the engine and then just falling down several hundred feet down. At least, of course, they're going to have to survive, but in reality, can you survive a 100 feet fall like that? Probably not.
Well, but, more likely to survive it than being vaporized. I mean, if you have 2 things to choose from.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and they are using they are built. They were dressed in armor, so it's possible. I guess I don't know. Not without injuries. They probably should have been more injured than they were.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit unbelievable with that. But I think that was the only thing that kind of was very compelling that I remember from that episode. Other than that, I think it was just kind of you see him again and you see him again. They basically turned, and you don't actually get to see him in the next 2 episodes, so you don't actually know what happened to Crosshair.
He's injured.
You just know that he's kind of badly burned.
He's very injured. He got the brunt of the engine fire that he was trying to vaporize them with, because they were thinking very, very they were thinking very laterally. I appreciate this episode for a couple of reasons, because it was very well written to kind of show how they're lateral thinkers on their feet. They were not necessarily. I mean, they were bred for combat, but their mutations make them even better than the regular stormtrooper or regular clone at this stuff. Each time they had an obstacle, they tried to think out their way out of it. So first they're trying to move to the back of the ship. First they're trying to listen to comms, but Crosshair has always been with them, so he knows that they're going to be listening to the comms and doing the opposite of what the people say, right, or what they're saying on comms. So they say, okay, now we can't use our regular tactics. Let's go to the back of the ship, because I think they were trying to go out through the cargo hold. So they go through the back of the ship. And he's like, well, then they realize they're going to the back of the ship. Then they try to blow them up using the engine. And like you said, they think on their feet. I didn't know how they were going to get out of that, but it was really good writing that they decided, let's just blow this section off, and then, whether or not we survive the drop is the next problem. But this problem right now is whether or not we're going to be vaporized, and we don't want to get vaporized. We're definitely going to get vaporized if we don't do anything. So yeah, that was really good writing. And then at the end of this episode, we saw the bounty hunter. I forget his name off the top of my head. Do you know?
Cad Bane.
Cad Bane.
Yeah.
From Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So he scoops up Omega to take to the Kaminoans, specifically the Prime Minister. He's working for the Prime Minister, and they have this like spaghetti western standoff where I don't know the way that they kind of boost up Hunter. I thought maybe he was going to be able to get a shot off, but no, he shoots him down because I think he's been a lot more standoffs than Hunter has been, and maybe Hunter is more like a battlefield fighter as opposed to a gunslinger. So
right.
that was interesting, and also I appreciated the POV shot of him inside of his helmet. Was it the end of that episode or the beginning of the next episode? I think it was
the end of that episode.
Yeah, so he was like just coming to, and you could just see inside of his helmet. It was all blurry and everything. I appreciated the direction on that. The decision to make that shot definitely gave you a sense of the claustrophobia of those helmets, especially if you're injured. And the disorientation that he was probably feeling, and probably the shame that he was feeling for losing Omega. So that was a really good shot. It was a good episode. It was of the last several episodes. Probably this episode starts a bunch of episodes. These 3 episodes are probably better than the previous 3 episodes.
Yes, they were. Yeah.
For various reasons. So. After the end of this episode, we don't know what's happening to Crosshair, but he's starting to get bandaged up, similar to Anakin. Basically, he's so scarred. Maybe we'll see him in a giant like Vader like suit, and in the next episode to keep him alive. With a bunch of life supports on it. We find out in the next episode, which is called Reunion, or
Bounty Lost.
Bounty Lost is what Reunion was the episode 8. In Bounty Lost, we get Finnick,
Shan
Fennec back again. She shows up, coming after Omega, and it seems that she is the specific bounty hunter for the Omega's creator, who's attached to Omega, because the Prime Minister, as soon as they get their hands on Omega, they're going to destroy her after they get the genetic material that they need. And she's very protective of her, so she sent her bounty hunter, and she actually is. They're showing that Finnick has somewhat of a heart or whatever, because Cat Bane does not care what happens to her. He just wants to get paid. So that episode is interesting for a couple reasons. So you kind of see through Omega's eyes what she doesn't want her future to be, because they happen to be on a planet where there is some other kind of cloning going on. It's not Kaminoan cloning, but she sees people in vats, and she doesn't want to go back to being a test subject. So you see the body horror look on her face with the aliens in the tube. What did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I think that definitely the standoff between Fennec and Cad Bane is definitely very compelling overall. I think that, whether or not Omega has kind of picked up a lot of the tricks from being with the Bad Batch, kind of like being resourceful, trying to escape and trying to trick the droid into like trying to fix the droid because of the previous battle. So trying to make sure that she has a lot of that type of resourceful behavior that is compelling, and also whether or not she's able to get out of that situation as well. And so I think that they really did a good job of that part. And going back to what you said about Cad Bane, I think that they're trying to kind of build him up to be this kind of very compelling character that is going to have some wins against the good guys, because you can't have a character to be formidable unless he has some wins.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that because of him taking Omega at the end of the reunion episode, it kind of again leads to that kind of compelling nature that you really don't want to root for this guy. You really want Omega to kind of find some way to get out of this situation. Not now knowing that you don't have kind of like backup, and then she has to like kind of find her way to the communications array, finding her way to make sure you get the message down. And I think that that's definitely again teaches a good lesson to people that even though if you're a child or you're a kid, you can still be very resourceful in these type of dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Not to say that you want a child to be in dangerous situations, but like just to kind of build that type of resourcefulness and ingenuity. And it kind of, again, it's kind of a spoiler alert to the next episode where you'll get to see that even more in this week's episode.
Yeah. Speaking, kind of going back to what I was saying from Loki about the fight choreography or the action scenes not being well thought about or well sketched out because it was a little sloppy. This fight between the Cat Bane Fennec Shan fight was really good. Like you saw them using all their wits against each other. You saw that. I think what the other reason that they set this up is really good storytelling. So they show that Cat Bane is so good that he was able to shoot down Hunter in that gunfight, right? You as you're saying, they're showing that he's a compelling villain because he's formidable. But they also show that even though Fennec Shan is new in the game, because he mentions that she's new in the game, right? He knows her. Right. She can go toe to toe with him. Like she actually bested him at the end, right? There was touch and go here, but she got Omega and she left and she disabled his ship. So they're showing that even though she's very new at it, she has a natural gift for it as well. Like because he's been at it for years. You would think he's probably one of the most seasoned bounty hunters out there, and she was able to best him in this instance. So they're showing that she's very, very, very good.
Yeah, for those of you that did not watch Clone Wars, Cad Bane was very formidable in Clone Wars. He was kind of like a very interesting foil to the Jedi and also to the clone troopers. They think there was one episode where he was kind of like the mastermind to kidnap like a number of the senators, including Senator Amidala. So he was very like already formidable. And when he appeared in this series, if you knew this backstory, that he was going to be somewhat of a challenge to the Bad Batch. But yeah, you're right. I think that they did do a very good job of kind of highlighting that, and also highlighting like Fennec being just as great and formidable, at a very, very young age. So it's again very, very good writing, very good storytelling, and trying to weave in kind of like weave in some of the previous stories of who Cad Bane was, and we'll see where Cad Bane kind of goes from here, whether or not this is just a one-off, or you're going to see him later on in other episodes of the Bad Batch.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they could go either way. So he lost. It's going to take him a while to get off of that planet because she disabled his ship. But I'm sure he'll figure it out in some way because he's a bit on an outpost where he can probably cannibalize some systems or whatever to take off. And I'm going to assume that the Prime Minister is not going to give up. I don't know if do you think Fennec Shan killed the Prime Minister's woman? Or because she could be just knocked out, right?
Right.
She was on the floor. Do you think she's dead?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, it could be the case, but then there'll be a power vacuum, I would assume, if that is the case, right?
I
So
mean, the prime minister's still in
yeah,
charge. He's still there, right? So there isn't a
right. Oh, okay. I'm recalling, like, who was the one that she shot though? Like on the ship?
So if you recall and I'm forgetting the name. Actually, you know what? I have it up here. The name of the of Omega's cloner, like the one that she has
Oh,
a
okay.
relationship with. She
Got it.
Let's see. It's called the second. Nalase is the one that likes who cares for Omega, and Lamasu. Sorry, not Lamasu. Tanwi is the one who Lamasu sent to meet up with Cat Bane, because Lamase wanted to go, but he was like, no, you're too close to this, and your judgment is impaired. So he sent Tanwi, and then we saw Tanwi on the floor, and we don't know whether or not she's dead or not.
Got it. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I remember, like, on Camino there were like the three Kaminoans, so I didn't know which one that they actually sent. I know that Omega's caretaker was not sent. I remember that part.
Right.
But
yeah,
I just don't. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. That's going to be also a very interesting thing to see if she comes back, if that Kaminoan comes back or not. Or that was kind of like the end of it.
Right. So I think that'll instruct us on what happens to what happens next with Cat Bane. I mean, if he doesn't hear back from Tanwi, I guess he can assume that she's dead, or assume that something went wrong, because he sent her to pick Omega up, and Omega's not coming back. So I think maybe he sends Cat Bane after her again, or maybe even some other bounty hunter. Maybe at some point we see young Boba going after his sister, basically, in later episodes. True. Because Boba shows up a lot in the Clone Wars. Right. I don't know how old he is at this point, but he shows up a lot in the Clone Wars.
I think he would be. He was, I think, in his 9 or 10 years old when it was in episode 2. So I would say that he's pre-teen at least by this time. He's probably in early teens by this time. So
we saw him. I think when we saw him last, he was a pre-teen. He was like a teenager, because we saw him infiltrate the academy at some point.
That's true.
Right.
Right. He did. Yep.
So he was he was young enough to play a cadet or in an episode of Clone Wars. So it's it'd be cool if he shows up later on, because he by the end of that series he was a bounty hunter. He was just a very young bounty hunter, and he started to build his own gang or whatever. As well. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to me, because we did. I don't know. We talked about this. I think we talked about this offline, where Fennec is older here, but then Boba is
older.
Younger.
And no, we talked about it in a previous stream as well. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Because Boba would be pretty young right now. But Fennec, unless Fennec is not a human, and she ages differently, but and she ages a lot slower. She's younger, she's old, she looks older than him now, but in a few decades after the Empire Strikes Back, basically, she's gonna look younger than Boba. So maybe she just doesn't age at the same rate.
Yeah, they definitely don't age at the same rate. Of course, Ming-Na Wen is playing Fennec Shand, but still, I just found it very surprising that they just I mean, you could still. I think you mentioned this in previous stream where they could have made Fennec Shand younger, but also have Ming-Na Wen be the voice.
Yeah, she could be. She could be a teenager as well, right? I mean, although they would have to make her like a tween to make her the ages match up, because I think the actor that plays Boba is maybe 10 years older than Ming-Na, and Ming-Na is like 50 something. Right. But she's also Asian, and they're both Asian, so she could play like 40. She could play 30. I don't know if she could play 30. She could play 40. So there's some wiggle room in there. So she doesn't look 50 something. She doesn't look like she's almost 60. So
definitely not. Yeah. So I just found it very interesting. Is that I think that was an oversight by the creators probably, or maybe they'll just explain it and say, hey, Fennec Shand is not truly human, like she's not going to age like the way that Boba Fett aged, because they did mention from episode 2 that Boba Fett was she did not get any type of acceleration of age. It was pretty much he was a normal,
just like clone. Omega, right? Yeah, she not Force grown, or not Force which we so it was interesting because those clones that Boba infiltrated with in the academy, like probably the next couple months they would be adults, even for them. Right. So he caught them at a very short period at a time where they're going to be teenagers.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So
that's just something. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was going to say the next episode, but go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead. We can talk about the next episode. I think I'm pretty much done with the age thing right now. It's just like kind of like in my head, kind of like spinning around with the age stuff.
So the next episode, which came out today, which is called Common Ground. So Common Ground, we have the clone troopers basically questioning the politics of the previous war, and they're seeing. Right. They're seeing more of the gray, right? And there's been lots of conversations about this online over the years since the prequels came out about whether or not the Separatists were really all that bad, given how dysfunctional the Republic was and how corrupt the Republic was. And it's interesting to see that the clone troopers, even though they were fighting on the clone side, on the Republic side, and for democracy, it's not clear that the Separatists were necessarily against democracy. They were against the bureaucracy of the Republic, right? And they had in the way that they decided to fight or fight and separate themselves is by using robots instead of clones. So they have to go and rescue the senator who was part of one of the Separatist worlds. Because he's being held by the Empire, so there's a whole lot of griping throughout the entire mission about whether or not we should trust this person. Are they setting us up to be destroyed? So it's interesting watching them understand how political the winds of political change are shifting underneath of them, and what they fought and killed and saw brothers die for years almost doesn't matter because everything is shifted now, and the political the hierarchies are different. So previous enemies are now friends, or at least allies, or at least allies, if not friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very interesting because the whole dynamic of them being in the walker, like when they were trying to escape, they were in the walker, and so even up to that point, they were not shooting at their brothers per se.
Right.
Their brothers. They were stunning them. They were using stun grenades and basically stun guns to stun them.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
So it's and this was also a theme that was very clear at the end of Clone Wars Season 7, was that Rex was basically just stunning a lot of the clones, because he considered them his brothers. So I think that whole dynamic is very, very interesting, and that they're not actually trying to kill them, and they still seem as though, look, you're our brothers. You're not we know who you are and things like that, even though we might have some disagreements. I mean, going back to, I think it was like one of the first few episodes where they had the fight in the mess hall. But even so, at the core of it, they're still kind of like, they feel that sense of brotherhood with them.
Yeah,
so I found that very interesting in terms of the contrast of trying to basically bring this political leader, the senator, into exile. Basically,
right.
You're trying to kind of. It's almost like any of those political thrillers where you're trying to kind of escort someone into safety so that they are in exile and not in some political some political happening in their home world. So very, very interesting stuff, very intriguing part of it. And additional point to that is whether or not you did mention about the gray, and I wonder if George Lucas or even Disney ever thought of, George Lucas, not Disney, because it was before Disney bought Star Wars that the prequels came out. But like whether or not ever George Lucas ever thought from that type of standpoint that you just raised about the gray of the Separatists, because what was presented to us of the Separatists was that, there's a clear kind of evil entity. They're all bad and the Republic is good, and they stand for democracy. And so I think that the Clone Wars and also this episode is very good at kind of fleshing out, what is that? What does that actually mean? Being a separatist. What is that? I hope that they really get to explore that even more because again, it's a very rich avenue to explore, because the prequels didn't really do that. It really didn't. So in a show like this, if hopefully they can kind of do that for, to kind of look at that type of political wind shifting and the politics shifting based on the hierarchies and things like that. So I think that's definitely an intriguing question. They kind of scratch the surface and not really, hopefully they try to explore that, dig deeper about that.
I want to say that they did explore this a little bit in the Clone Wars. So it's been a couple years, or it's been a year or so since I watched all the episodes. So I don't remember all of them, and the way that I watched them is back to back. I think we mentioned this in a previous stream. I didn't watch them as they were released, so they kind of blur together. But I do think that they tried to show more of the nuance of the war and the fact that both sides are being manipulated by the Emperor to his own end, to take over the entire galaxy and create an empire. So I think that they may have touched on the fact that the Separatists had some legitimate grievances, and the Jedi, in their hubris, just assumed that they were on the side of good, and the Republic was the side of good, which is part of the reason why they were able to be overtaken, because they assumed they had a more nuanced view. I think if you go back to, and I think they have this in some of the High Republic stuff that they're coming out now with, the original Jedis weren't necessarily wedded to any sort of like government, but by the time we get to the New Republic era, they're basically henchmen for the government, and if they were going by their original tenets, they would have maybe been able to see the double or triple game that the Emperor was playing, and the fact that he was manipulating everyone on all sides to his ends. So I think that they definitely do touch on it a little bit in the Clone Wars, and probably, and I would like for them to explore that even more as they go along in this episode, in this show, because at this point, like I said, the Clone Wars are becoming more and more relevant, and it's clear that the Clone Wars were basically elaborate machinations to gain power. So when more and more people on both sides understand that, maybe we see more revelation similar to the one that we had in this episode, with the guys understanding that they were basically pawns. A lot of the universe, this galaxy were pawns in this elaborate scheme.
Right, and I think that it's definitely some. Yeah, I would definitely like them to kind of move forward and explore that part. And I do actually have one final point, and you alluded to the fact that the Jedi are very hubris, and they kind of had almost like a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
So is that an indictment on Yoda, or is that an indictment on the Jedi Council that they were not, that they kind of had that blind spot, or could have been avoided, or they were so blinded by the fact that Anakin was the chosen one, and that was kind of like their own thing, for them to kind of like say, oh yeah, he's going to balance the force, so we don't need to really worry about that, and we're just kind of like, again, blinded by that fact. So is that an indictment on Yoda, or is it an indictment on the council?
I think Yoda is a large part of the council, so it's
Right.
it's somewhat. I mean, he's the oldest, probably one of the oldest people on the council. I don't know if Yaddle was older than him, or if she wasn't. But we saw. I mean, his speeches are very long lived. You can imagine that Yoda was part of the Jedi's as maybe a Padawan during the High Republic time. So he's been there,
Mm-hmm.
and he saw the organization change, and he hasn't. And he let it change with him. So, I mean, not a lot of these characters are not necessarily 100% flawless.
Mm-hmm.
I think Yoda has always been characterized as wise, but not like omniscient. Like he's not omniscient and omnipresent, right? There's an episode in the Clone Wars where he takes this journey, and he takes this journey, and that's where he learns how to become a Force ghost, rather, right? 'Cause
Right.
he communes with Qui-Gon.
Right.
So it's not something that he learned by himself, right? He still has growing to do, all the way up until when he dies. Even though he's a lot older and wiser than most of the other people on the council. So, yeah, I think it's an indictment of the entire Jedi Order, really. So,
Yeah,
at that
definitely. Well, that's hopefully a question that I don't think it might be explored in this series, but I hope that with the new stuff that's coming out with the High Republic, you really kind of get to examine his motivations, and also kind of like his decision making as to why he was thinking the way he was thinking, in the Clone Wars. So hopefully they can kind of tie that back in to, because we all kind of like see, based on past experiences, you don't ever want to make the same mistake. Again, it's human nature. You don't want to make that same mistake, but it'll be kind of interesting to see kind of how they weave that back into, the present, the present timeline.
yeah, when you're telling stories, when you're telling stories in multiple time periods like this, so there's an opportunity to screw it up and do crappy storytelling, but it's also an opportunity to make it more complex and more interesting, because the Clone Wars definitely made the prequels more interesting, and
Yes.
and this Mandalorian is making the time between the end of Star Wars, the original Star Wars series, and the beginning of the more recent ones more interesting as well. So you can recontextualize. If you're a good storyteller, you can add those elements in. So maybe if we get some stories from the High Republic, we understand how Yoda, even though he's very wise, got to the point that he did during the New Republic, and why he was blind to the machinations of Palpatine. Maybe
Right.
that we get that. Maybe we see some things that happen with him, and maybe what we see why he was okay with the Order changing over to specifically following a specific or being aligned with a specific political order. In this case, being democracy. I mean, we think that democracy is great because the alternatives are bad, but
Right.
the previous, like I said, the previous order wasn't aligned with any political order whatsoever. They just had their Jedi Order was kind of separate and not necessarily attached to any specific government. So, yeah. I think it's. I'm interested to see what's at this point. We're 10 episodes in. We have 6 more left. I'm far more into the show now than I was at the beginning, where it was like we have some episodes here or there that are good. The last 3 episodes were good for lots of different reasons, and as you said, even the subtle things that they're doing, like showing you that it's taking them some time for their minds to adjust to this new reality where their brothers are shooting at them to kill every single time that they encounter them, and they're still stunning them, and they're stunning them and them with that mindset could put themselves in danger of being killed themselves if they're not shooting to kill as well.
That's true.
We'll see whether or not we get an evolution where at some point they start shooting their brothers, or they always think that, you know what, these are our brothers and they're mind controlled, so it'd be wrong of us to ever shoot at them, even if it puts our lives in danger, because they're always
one final point about that is that there is that transition, from the beginning of this of the series, about where Tarkin was saying that they wanted to have, non-clone troopers there. So, because of that shift, would that be kind of a convenient way for the writers to say, hey, these are non-clones, so, and then, but how do you know? But how will you know they're not?
Yeah,
clones?
they're like,
stuff, so.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because they're all in stormtrooper gear, so it's hard to tell who's behind the mask. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily even better for our heroes to be killing regular people, too. Even though these are regular people who aren't mind controlled and they're there of their own volition, we understand even from these episodes and also from things from The Mandalorian, that's unclear, right? Because the Republic wasn't doing everything that they should be doing, especially on the Outer Rim planets, right? The ones that were further out. So there are people who think, this empire, they're from a certain point of view that this empire is helping them out, and is more functional than the Republic ever was. So yeah. All right. So that was my last thought about this. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add before we?
I think overall, I think it's getting more compelling, and I think that, stay tuned for even more revelations, I would say, like what will happen to Omega, and just kind of like, I think that there's there's probably a couple more shoes to drop above Omega that we don't know about. And I think that, they kind of teased that at the end with the strategy game that, with Hunter and stuff like that. So we'll see where that leads us towards the end of season 1 of Bad Batch.
Yeah. All right, so that is what we think about the episode, but we're interested to hear what you guys think. We actually are live streaming on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, and we weren't paying attention to the chat, so I'm sorry about that. We'll be better about that in the future. We want to hear what you think, so comment down below, and we will see you next week at the same time when we talk about... Actually, we're going to talk about... not just Loki, but next week we get Black Widow. So we'll talk about Black Widow and Loki next week. All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys.